The winners, they will definitely have governed AI. So that's the only possible outcome, whatever form, whatever vendor, but they need to have a governance layer to AI. The losers will have a lot of technical debt or a lot of AI slop because again, AI is great, but it just generates things and they will end up with a lot of disconnected kind of prototypes glued together in a way that they will have to manage technical debt.
Hi, Hugo. Welcome to Drag and Drop.
Hi, Feroz. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope that I can do my best to clarify whatever you have in mind.
I appreciate you speaking to me. Before we kind of jump into things, it'd be good for those who don't know you to get a bit of introduction to yourself and your background.
So I've been quite a while in OutSystems now, almost 11, 12 years, but I came from the ecosystem. So I was myself an OutSystem architect for a large insurance in Portugal, so Fidelidade. And I was the one responsible for evaluating the platform and getting to know and setting the first kind of governance model for this low code that at that time, this was 17, 18 years ago, there wasn't like a benchmark for what to do with low code. So I was struggling and trying to fit in that on a very typical traditional kind of high code house that was Fidelidade at that time. Then after a couple of years after, I transitioned into OutSystem from a startup. On that startup, I have applied some of the concepts that the platform brought at a high expense. So a lot of hours getting the DevOps correct and all the governance correct. But once I transitioned to OutSystem, within my OutSystem tenure, I had a lot of roles. So I was working in operations, so managing the cloud, setting up everything related to our cloud offer, AWS partnerships, and so on. I worked briefly for around 2 years as a CSM. CS was starting back then in OutSystems, and I was working as kind of a technical account manager for top customers in the US. And then I transitioned to solution architect. So I was for 4 or 5 years in London, managing the SI team there. And then yet again, I transitioned, and OutSystem offers a lot of opportunities for that. And in the last 2 years, I'm working in an EMEA scope with strategic customers. Internally, we call this function business value consultant. So it's trying to translate and have top customers extract the most value out of the platform. And I think that it's a bit of the topic of the conversation today.
That's what I wanted to ask about, with this strategic, kind of customer title, what puts an organization into that category of being a strategic customer?
So there's always a vendor perspective and the customer's perspective, right? But the ones that click and get into this kind of strategic bucket are the ones that see the platform not as a technical capability for IT, but as a business capability. So the ones that have kind of the business goals aligned with IT, and that's unfortunately rare. And there's a change process to get there. Also, it's very important to have the right executive sponsorship. Without executive sponsorship, it's very difficult just to have a IT capability that is not aligned with the outcomes that our customers want. But I would say that really this kind of alignment and extracting and having clarity on the business goals before doing the first step, and then being able to have this executive sponsorship so that they scale, it's one of the most important things for an organization to be considered strategic for us.
And what do these organizations have to really have in place before they start with the platform?
So actually that's a curious kind of question because again, a lot of customers start or prospects start evaluating these kind of technologies, looking for an IT capability and they want a quick fix. So they have a problem and they want to fix that problem or that gap as fast as possible. But in hard reality, if they do not have clear data lake or a data structure that you can lay the foundations, if they do not have a good integration capability or integration mapping, it's very hard to bring these technologies because OutSystem comes in and typically plugs into data and plugs into existing integrations and builds on top of that. And the last thing is really the change management process. And then this is really important because we'll get the speed and agility that the customers want, but without clear access to data, without clear integration capabilities, and a solid change management process or an operating process, it's very hard to bring these technologies. And it puts us in kind of a strange place where we do offer the agility and the speed to get the outcomes, but then the lagging factors are really data and integration access to get that going.
Yeah. And, and you touched on, what are those warning signs, that you see that, okay, maybe this company isn't quite ready?
So having access to a strong champion, and a strong champion is not someone that wears the OutSystem t-shirt. He's someone that actually is able to understand how to map the technical capabilities to what the outcomes that you want. Without that strong champion, it's very hard to be ready, right? It's very hard to start. And then yet again, it's the same principle of technology only goes so far, and this applies to all vendors, right? Without having that strong champion with a full breadth of capacity mapping to whatever portfolio of vendors or technologies the customer has in place, it's very hard to really expect a vendor to solve a problem, right? So it's really ownership. This is still a build platform OutSystems. What that means is, even though we are sometimes trapped in between the build and the buy kind of cycle, you still have to have ownership of the outcomes. And without having this ownership of the outcomes is not the technology that is going to solve that. So making sure that you have a strong champion with ownership of the outcomes is, I think, one of the most important aspects.
And, with these organizations, if they could only get, one thing right, what do you think that would be? Would it be, governance, architecture, their operating model? What is the kind of the main thing they could get right to kind of set them up for success?
People and process. Everything will follow. What that means is that, so when you start to do the first steps in OutSystems, it's sometimes it's unclear who owns the outcomes. And then this comes so we have a very strong partner ecosystems. And what that means is that sometimes customers just bring a partner to solve that problem without wanting themselves to have ownership of that problem. And what that means is that this creates a huge skill gap from what the partner brings and actually the outcomes that the internal IT has to have. So it's really important to understand that people and processes come first. And I think this is the definition of ready to adopt these kind of technologies before really even looking at the technical capabilities and onboarding developers, for example. I do think that having also a certification level of developers so that you have a common kind of baseline of knowledge, it's also very important. So people, processes, and with that people and process scope, how can you train and onboard the right people to OutSystems? Also, the change management is important on these kind of people and processes, because right now it's kind of different, because right now low code is kind of a space and OutSystem is already a brand name within this space. But beforehand, what happens is that we were actually fighting against developers with no particular reason. That means that this mindset of developers needing to understand that they are a mean to the end. So they will need to fulfill a business capability or deliver on business capability without going into the bit and the byte immediately. So developers are passionate for, I was myself a developer
Yeah.
for a particular set of technologies.
Mm.
And changing this mindset of you are fulfilling a function and just choose the best tools to do that use case or build that use case is rather important.
Yeah, I guess it's not, it's not important of how you get, like, what you use to get there. It's it's kind of, the way you do it. It's not that important. It's kind of getting the end product and delivering what you need to deliver.
Yeah, correct.
Moving on from, the early wins to kind of more enterprise-wide adoption, where do, enterprises typically, underinvest in the first year?
So, like I said, enablement, I think, is the major underinvestment. Making sure that their teams are ready to execute. I think that's the point. And then at a higher maturity level, as soon as you have the team enabled, sorry, it's really how do you get to a COE stage? So how can you create the operating model? That means that you are reusing as much as possible. You are creating the foundations to get the demand of the IT. So this is a demand problem and not a supply problem. The technology will serve the supply part. Now the demand getting so that the backlog is clear, ownership, and the team enablement. I think it's the major underinvestment within this kind of space.
Yeah. And, what do you feel, and this might follow on from the last answer, but, what separates organizations that scale from those that stall?
So they are not building use cases; they are building a factory. So that's the kind of the shift that needs to happen, and it it needs a special type of structure and mentality to identify reusable patterns, to also not overcomplicate, because sometimes there's a lot of legacy in terms of the governance model that these customers bring from other technologies. And then when they are starting with OutSystem, they also need to understand the OutSystem platform brings a lot of guardrails in the way it generates code and runs code. And that means that these kind of gap needs to be understood in a way that they maximize the output of this factory instead of just trying to build a use case. So that's, I think it's the most important paradigm shift is think about the output in the factory and less about what you're building at the end of the day.
And you touched on, obviously, that, internal capability is really important, and obviously partners are also there to support. How should each enterprise think about internal capability versus partners? Because like you said, obviously in the space we're in, we come across many who don't have that internal capability. How should they be balancing that?
So partners bring speed. So what that means is that on day zero, they are actually able to hit the ground running and just deliver. Now, the most important thing is for you to make sure, or a customer to make sure, that their knowledge is translated into their internal teams. So having at least one architect to be able to translate that, and also to clear roadblocks, because there will be a couple of roadblocks. It's important in order for you to kind of get the show going, right? So partners are very important in the first kind of stages. On a later stage, partners are also important. And some of our customers actually realize that they see kind of partners as an extendable arm of
Yeah.
them. So if they have the COE in place, they have the ground foundations, and they are able to plug multiple partners. So some partners are very niche to specific technologies, say partners in SAP, for example, that bring that expertise. But some partners are more tailored to unique UX, UI, kind of B2C kind of use cases. So if you have your COE and your governance model well defined, it's fairly easy on the later stage to just get the partners on the right framing, on the right, and with the contract well understood. They are not just delivering FTEs, they need to deliver the outcomes with a certain level of quality that is asked by kind of a frame contract that these kind of very mature customers have with partners. And typically they go to market. I see customers that have basically year tenders that they just go to market to our partners and just say, look, for the next year, we are choosing 3 partners. Please bid and realize that this is the interface and the level of quality that we need. So there's multiple kind of from getting the first step in speed with the partners, transition then the knowledge to an internal team, and then creating the interfaces so that an internal team can be augmented for specific reasons for a specific project. I think it's very important.
Yeah. And talking about those internal kind of roles, as a client or customer scales, which one's the most important roles they need to kind of have that, you touched on it, as they kind of scale and grow and, want to build that COE, which roles are the most kind of critical?
So solution architects that don't need to be solution architects within the OutSystems scope are one of the most important roles. And these are the people that understand the build versus buy kind of dilemma. They can kind of understand the reusable patterns that get the most out of the technology. And then after those, I would think that having a clear platform ownership on the business side. So if you are looking at the platform that can fulfill a series of domains. So imagine that you start with a customer with a supply chain kind of use case. So you have a business owner and a stakeholder for that domain. And this is very important because the agility and the speed that then the OutSystem projects run put a lot of pressure within the business to take decisions, right? So you cannot be waiting for 2 weeks on a decision when you in 2 weeks you can get the use case built or the new cycle or the new release done. So it's very important to have these strong solution architects kind of baseline that understand the repeatable patterns, then full business accountability on a business owner. And sometimes you need the interface in between these. So even though we typically on OutSystem projects, we do not have a specific business analyst to translate these. Some customers might need them depending on the maturity that they are writing requirements against.
Yeah. Do you feel, with customers and kind of partners and this building internal capability that, because some countries have a shortage of experienced talent in those areas, so they feel that they're more against hiring traditional and training versus they'd rather just use a partner who already have those skills?
Well, it's so you need to certify developers. This is the kind of the first baseline. Like I said in the beginning, there's always kind of a pushback by developers of using these kind of technologies, and it's important to have someone that has the knowledge to transition them from a technical developer to a business developer. And this is kind of the middle ground where OutSystem and low-code generally sits. So people that can actually have enough technical knowledge that they can go deep within the platform stack and take the advantage of the platform capabilities, but while still maintaining kind of a relationship with the business. This creates over time kind of the platform standards that you need to operate to. And really, certification is a cornerstone. You can certify any developer coming from traditional technologies to OutSystems in a fairly easy way. So typically the rule of thumb is a professional developer can get certified in 2 to 3 weeks and get proficient within a month. A non-developer will get there, but will take typically twice as much. And it needs to have that kind of mindset, programmatic brain to be able to do it. But without the certifications, you are just running loose within your teams, basically.
And what advice would you give to leaders who are really dependent on hero developers?
We have a lot of those. So every time you have a hero development, you have a single point of failure. And I have some funny stories along these times where I was starting with work with customers and realizing and spending time. So this was pre-COVID, everyone in the office, and I was spending time with the customers. And once I was in a UK customer, banking customer, and it was kind of interesting because I realized that that person that we were talking with, which was a to be champion, was actually a hero developer. And what that means is that even though he feels realized by that, so everyone was going to his desk asking questions, he wasn't blocking a lot of things. But customers need to realize once that person is gone on a very competitive job market, so he can go away or he can just be absent on vacation. So you have a very strong dependency with that particular hero developer. So how can you build the guardrails? How can you build the operating model? And how can you be clear to all the team that the technology is transparent and with a good baseline of architecture. So AI Mentor helps a lot on this stage. Everyone has this clarity on what to do next, and there's not a single point of contact or failure within the team. So they are important. They are important because they hold a lot of context typically. But at the end of the day, it's really a liability that the customers have if they depend on these hero developers. We love them, but also from a customer perspective, they need to realize that it's a short-term gain for a medium to long-term loss if they just bet all in one single person.
And I think that it's more important in the countries like the UK where there is a shortage of talent, right? Experienced talent. So if you're in one of those countries like the UK, there's probably recruiters tapping that person up on a weekly basis. So the chances of them moving on are very high.
The UK and the US are very competitive markets on the job market. And that means that developers and these top tier kind of developers have a lot of choices. And people are still sentimental. What that means is that sometimes, unfortunately, we see these kind of people that are, they would be the most amazing champion, but they are actually not able to change their mentality and just understand that they are a business function at the end of the day. And AI actually is transforming this because code is right now a commodity. Everyone generates code. And these people need to, or these kind of developers need to realize that their edge that they had in the past in terms of the job market is being eroded over time as AI comes.
When you touched on it, switching to the most talked about topic, for the last few years, probably for you on a daily basis, it consumes everything, AI and agentic AI, I'm interested to know, what is the first reality check, you're giving regarding agentic AI?
Quite an interesting. So there's a lot of buzz within AI. There are very few customers that are actually using AI at scale, and I do think that the first most important take is do not use AI just as a suggestion. So generating context or even code is quite easy. Doing it in a way that AI can act with the specific guardrails, I think it's the key to this kind of industrial transition. It's very easy nowadays to use the LLMs and everything about code generation, actually giving that the correct frame so that that piece of non-deterministic code can run within a deterministic kind of enterprise. It's key. And I think Agent Workbench does quite a lot of these, which is all the tracing and all the guardrails that is around Agent Workbench actually allow this kind of transition from just suggestion to actually acting with the human in the loop and having some control of the process. But I do think that it's a unique place and time in the industry that when I retire in a couple of years, I will look back and take my findings out of that. So no one knows what's coming, but everyone is excited.
Yeah, yeah. And then, what prerequisites are needed, before agents are, you touched on it, they're trusted for you to take action because obviously, there's obviously this big hype and like you said, there's not that many actually doing much with it, so, what are they?
So first off, trying to get the guardrails right. So we released, think, not very connected at this stage with all the roadmap and the releases, but we released, I think, 1 month ago, the evals.
Yes.
Evals are quite important because it's really a safeguard that the customers have around the LLM output. This is the utmost importance. Otherwise, you are just relying blindly on agents. And when you are also relying on agents, you need to understand that you have a life cycle in terms of as soon as you do the first agent and you are kind of understanding from all the trail logging and all of the execution logging what the agent is doing, you are putting these safeguards. But then if you want to transition for the agent to act, actually, you first have to have a human in the loop to control the output and of that agent. So how can you build these guardrails? You put the human in the loop, and what is your decision in terms of threshold of quality so that you can then remove for some low risk kind of actions the human in the loops. This transition and this life cycle of an agent, I think it's very important so that the agents can act actually. And also the same way and connecting to what we were talking. This is still development. It's the same thing. You are just accelerating um, some of the domains that you actually could write in code a couple of years back, but with hundreds and hundreds of lines of code to get the logic, the rule engines, and so on. You are delegating those to an LLM, but at the end of the day, the output still needs to be owned by business. So business needs to be the one deciding which agents can act, which agents do need the human in the loop kind of process. So it's looking at this kind of abstraction that the agents allow so that you are still under control in the outcomes that you delivered by the use case that you are wanting to build. So I think this transition is quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And there's obviously, most organizations are very kind of cautious and not kind of rushing, but there is some who, they just want to kind of rush into it and then get things going. What mistakes are these companies making?
Choosing the LLM first instead of the platform. Because if you look at the last just 12 months or even 6 months of AI evolution, you see the battle in between the main players, Gemini, Anthropic, OpenAI, and so on. All of these models will evolve with time. And that means that if you are choosing at this stage and point in time a given LLM to ground all of your AI work, that means that you are missing a trick. So how do you understand how to choose the platform and the governance on top so that these LLMs can be pluggable, replaced over time? I think that's the key kind of point. You cannot bypass governance in this kind of process. So platform over LLMs at the first. I think it's the most important step in terms of decisions to enter this AI world. And if you look at what everyone is doing, they are loving either they choose one and it's like football. They choose that club and they are all for
They
that
go
club.
for
And I
it,
do
yeah.
think that in a capability kind of perspective, you need to be able to plug and unplug the same way you
Yeah.
look at previous 10 years ago integration. So you have a CRM. How can you make sure that you are not grounded to that CRM and you can replace the CRM if that CRM doesn't fit your needs? So platform over LLMs, I think it's the most important decision.
Yeah. And, when kind of, advising these strategic customers, how are you advising them around, how they should think about experimentation versus production?
It's interesting because so our customers or even prospects at a large scale do have access to a lot of technology. And what that means is that they are in love with AI because right now they can produce an
Right.
output or an application. I do think that we offer the same kind of capabilities in terms of ODC and
Yeah.
Mentor and vibe coding right now.
Mm.
The point here is that they are really just looking at two silos, either the experimentation silo, either the production silo, right? And what we are trying to get here in OutSystem is, yes, you can experiment with OutSystems in ODC. It's even free, so it's not a licensing metric. Generation of applications, you can have as many applications in non-production environments, for example. But then how can you then transition that pilot to the end result? So without having just dummy data, with plugging with the right integrations, with the right LLMs and the right data, so that you can transition a pilot to actually a production application. So that's I think it's a bit of a mixed world right now with so many vendors on the
Yeah.
experimentation side.
Yeah. And, how early do you think, security and risk teams need to be involved in this process?
From day zero. The later you bring them, the more pain you'll suffer at the end. And this is especially important. And this is not new. So even though AI puts a specific spin into that, you need to have a security team understand what is OutSystems. And this is very important, not only now, but beforehand. I had a lot of interactions with security teams that they want to control the output of the generated code. They do not understand that OutSystem generates the code pretty much in a systematic way. So once they scan or do a static code analysis under the code or pen test, any finding, you fix one and all the applications are fixed. So that mentality of having the security teams also understand this kind of agentic world, the safeguards, the guardrails, the evals, the traceability that they can shift. They can ship to their own tool of choicing to understand the logging and the tracings and the execution is very important, because if you try to plug these at the end, it's just derailing your project, and it's putting a lot of pressure on the go live instead of just making sure that security is from day zero, knowing that what is OutSystems, are the AI, agentic AI capabilities of OutSystems, and how all of these works so that they have the right level of control in order to give the go ahead to a go live of an agentic application.
I'm interested now, what is the kind of, obviously, with, Agent Workbench, Mentor, as you speak to CISOs, what is the kind of consensus? What's the feedback when they see these features in the platform?
They are right now comparing, basically. They are feature comparing with other vendors. I think the long-term OutSystem customers that are strategic enough, they understand kind of the noise
Yeah.
that there is on the market. The new ones are actually just comparing, and sometimes they are not comparing the same things. Again, they are comparing an output on the result versus a platform or the governance out of that platform. The real problem is that when people try to do shortcuts. So for a short gain, they abdicate a lot of the governance, the security, and so on, in order to go live with the use case that they have in mind to apply agentic AI. So I do think that there's a bit of a perfect storm within the C-suite in terms of AI. Some CIOs are just wanting to tick a box. Some of them are thinking strategically and understanding kind of the governance of how does AI change what I already did, and what is this translation layer that needs to be put in place so that they can still deliver the same outcomes and taking advantage of these new technologies.
And looking ahead, to the future, and obviously things are changing rapidly. It could go in a total different direction.
Yeah.
What do you feel will differentiate, the winners from the losers over the next 3 years, let's say?
The winners, they will definitely have governed AI. So that's the only possible outcome, whatever form, whatever vendor, but they need to have a governance layer to AI. The losers will have a lot of technical debt or a lot of slop, AI slop, because again, AI is great, but it just generates things, and they will end up with a lot of disconnected kind of prototypes glued together in a way that they will have to manage technical debt. There are also tools to do that, but if you are starting to lay tool on top of tool and tool that completes all your full stack kind of capability and governance model, you are actually having a lot of tools. So then you need to strike kind of a balance in between what is the least amount of tools that I can bring into my business that creates the right outcome and the right governance model to be able to achieve my business outcomes.
And with you speaking to many leaders, what are the kind of top three priorities for, not the ones who want to tick a box, but the others, right? Who kind of, what's their kind of priorities, today?
Data is number one. So making sure data. So when you point an LLM to data, you really understand that you have a lot of power. And if you don't get the data right, that means that you are just generating weak outcomes or weak outputs out of your data. Then the orchestration layer. So orchestration is important because if you think as how AI works, AI is just a piece of automation, right? And automation without orchestration, without the guardrails and everything that we spoke about, is just creates a weaker or a more subjective outcome. So how do you put these together? How do people workflows, the correct data lake works together in a way that is orchestrated to fulfill a use case? And then going back right to the beginning of the interview, people are still important. So that
Yeah.
operating model within all of this frame, we are generating business outcomes. The mentality needs to be right. The guardrails, the foundations, not around AI, but around how you deliver code, need to be in place. And only if you have the data, the orchestration layer, and then this operating model in place, you can actually get the right outcomes.
And obviously we spoke about customers, and strategic accounts, but personally for you, what are you kind of most excited about or looking forward to seeing how things evolve with, like, as we're in this kind of agentic era, let's say?
So it's a tricky question because I don't know at what level I can speak about, but
Sure.
I do think that the enterprise brain of specific functions is a very interesting thing. It's kind of strange because it's the way conversations are morphing within these kind of strategic customers, because agents, I do think that they are just a middle ground. Agents put an LLM with context with tools to do execution or to execute and to act on. But if you think about the abstraction that some of the hype tools on AI are bringing,
Yeah.
and the kind of capabilities that the OutSystem platform brings, you definitely realize that OutSystem can be the glue in between the tools that are right now being used by small teams, startups, to actually plug into the enterprise space where kind of the platform orchestrates a business function with AI. What that means is that he's pulling up architecture, patterns, integrations, the necessary at the right place so that you can execute a business function, being that sales, supply, marketing, whatever business function. So how can you make sure that you are within that context and you do not pollute the next context? So how do these business functions work together so that AI or the platform OutSystem allows you to kind of capture that business function and accelerate the plug into AI of the platform capabilities regarding this kind of way that the industry is going around autonomous agents and so on.
Well, I appreciate you speaking to me, Hugo. It's great to talk to you and hear,
Yeah,
what you're hearing and seeing currently in this crazy time that we're in. You think there's not been one like it. Keen to keep in touch and see how things evolve in the future.
yeah. Thank you so much, Feroz, for the time and for your work in the low code space.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Hugo.